All right, this is Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching PH2T3R Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And I'm here, as always, with my co-host, C.B. Robertson, author of many fine books, especially one that pertains to what we're doing right now, which is The Hero and the Man. And it's specifically about, the heroes and the man, which would be Odysseus. And in this episode, we're going through a read-through of Homer's Odyssey, and we're going to go through books, I believe, 5 through 8. And that's, is it Phaeacians? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, the Phaeacians, yes. We meet the Phaeacians. We also meet Odysseus. This is the book about Odysseus, and we hadn't met him in the first 4 books. It's only in book 5 that we actually meet this character that we keep hearing so much about from the other characters but not seeing. And so here we are. We find him stranded alone on an island in a truly tragic situation, being molested by a goddess. Yeah. But he is genuinely sad. He's longing for home. And he's described as sitting out on the rocks, looking over the water, weeping, longing for his return. And no one knows where he is. No one knows whether he's alive or not. And one gets the sense that he sort of knows that no one knows what's happened to him, that he's just kind of vanished into this island with this goddess Calypso, who, and we did a little bit of talking about the importance of names before. Calypso, or Calypso, depending on whether you're a Y or a U person in translating Greek, means one who encloses or hides away. And there's an obvious feminine connotation to that. But there's also, as Greg Nodge describes, a death connotation. Not just enclosing in a fun way, but enclosing in a like you're going into your grave kind of way. And there is significance symbolically and metaphorically in a number of different dimensions to the fact that she lives in a cave on this island. There's a few caves that we go into in the Odyssey. Calypso's is not the only one. There's, I want to say, 3 caves, all of which are significant in their own ways. But Calypso's is the first cave that we are introduced to. And we will talk more about caves in the latter half of the book as well.
Cool. Well, since we're on the island, before we go to the next phase of the adventure, let's talk about that book. And it actually reminded me, while you were describing what happened, it reminded me a little bit of the Epic of Gilgamesh, when he's being seduced by the goddess. There, and he's like, no. You know what happens to like the guys who hook up with you? And while there is nothing, I mean, the way this is described, I feel like the language in these books, this little patch of books, is much more descriptive. And I mean, it was descriptive in the last ones, but it's even more, I think, descriptive and kind of poetic. The way that's used, or maybe just the way that's translated. But I think they go in greater depth in describing things. And the way that she's described and her household is described is all very beautiful. And the islands, you get a real picture for that. But a man like Odysseus can never be satisfied by being a goddess's boy toy. Because that's what she basically acts in. I mean, because he's just going to be, he can be Odysseus the king, returned from the Iliad, returned from battle in Troy, hero, etc., and has this household and whatever, and he can be a man in his own right, or he just becomes like a trophy husband for Calypso, which is, so I mean, it's really kind of a no-brainer from his perspective. I mean, the sex is probably nice, but
undoubtedly, and there's an interesting part where, and this will, I think, bother a certain type of person who has a very like modern moral notion of like what marriages are supposed to be like and how you're supposed to talk about your spouse, not sort of thinking about the obligations and how one speaks to the gods. But there's an interesting passage where he's telling Calypso directly. It's like, oh, of course Penelope can't compare with you in beauty. And one imagines there's like an edge to this conversation. Like, you don't want to insult a goddess for not only your sake, but for your wife's sake either. So Odysseus's tact is coming through here as well. It's not just, talking down about his own wife, because he clearly loves her a lot too. But he does say, of course, she can't compete with a goddess. But there's also, in addition to the difference between being, king in your own land versus the kind of plaything of a divine person. And like you say, it might express itself for different reasons in different stories. But there's this sense that there's something dangerous or undesirable about being the male consort of a goddess. And again, it's like the reason is different in Gilgamesh than it is in the Odyssey. But there's this very amusing back and forth between, like the book 5 opens with this amusing back and forth between Hermes, who has been sent from Mount Olympus to come down and tell Calypso basically, hey, it's been ordained from above that Odysseus is going to get home now, so you have to let him go. And she throws this kind of fit about it. He's like, you gods always have a problem when us goddesses have a male consort. You take female consorts all the time, but as soon as one of us goddesses takes a male consort, you strike him with a bolt of lightning, or you turn him into a tree, or whatever. That, like, there's this implication that the gods on high don't like the goddesses having mortal lovers.
Are you saying that there's a sexual double standard?
And one that the women seem to be complaining about, which is completely,
as they often do.
right. Right. It's as old as time. But Hermes says, you think what you like, but this is how it's going to go, and you have to do what Zeus says, basically.
Right.
So she very kindly and generously says to Odysseus, hey, look, I can't give you a boat, but I can make provisions for you and help you on your way. I do have good intentions. And she helps him on his way. And so he has to he winds up on the island of the Phaeacians. The way he gets there is kind of funny, because he basically almost drowns on the way. Poseidon, the gods tried to get Odysseus on his way while Poseidon was away, while he was off visiting like the Ethiopians or something. Yeah. Poseidon sort of catches word that Odysseus is off this island, is not trapped anymore. He's like, oh, let me give one final kind of middle finger to this guy. And so he throws a storm at him, basically. And Odysseus just about drowns. He is like, his ship is destroyed, and another goddess comes to help him. This is this persistent theme of being helped by divine forces. In this case, a mortal woman who became a goddess of sorts named Ino. And Ino, in the form of a white bird, which I believe is a tern. It could be a white-capped albatross or a seagull, but I like to think it was a tern. I actually had one of the art pieces in The Hero and the Man. It was this very nice tern image. I don't know if that's how visible that is, but terns are one of the white birds that come through the Aegean in that area. But anyways, this goddess arrives and hands him this scarf that basically, like, if you wear this, you won't die. Basically, you'll be saved and protected. And he dutifully accepts it with the promise that he'll give it back. And then he survives the storm, but then coming to shore is its own problem. Like, he doesn't want to drown, but there's these swells that are threatening to bash him against the rocks. And he manages to find a place without getting completely lacerated. He does get a little cut up. And then he dutifully throws the scarf back into the water. And so now he's stuck on shore, completely naked, bruised. And in this passage is described as he was heartbroken. There's this whole section in Adam Nicholson's book about how to properly translate this line, where he was the Greek root is domos, which is where we get dominated or domesticated. He was conquered by the sea, basically. He was completely wiped out by the sea. He was like done, but he survived, half drowned, naked, cut up on an island he doesn't know. And he's like, well, now what do I do? And he manages to make a bed of sorts between two olive trees. And then Athena comes down and puts it in the mind of this young princess who lives on this island that she should be a good future wife and go wash her clothes at this stream with her handmaids. And this is the beginning of the island of the Phaeacians scene, which is one of the most peculiar and sort of intriguing scenes. And in a book where we have actual descriptions of Odysseus having sex with people and so forth, there's like a lot of sexual tension in this scene, despite there being no sex. Right. But he basically gets washed up on shore on the island of the Phaeacians, and this girl, probably 14 or 15-year-old girl, and her handmaids coming out to wash clothes, and they're playing with a ball. The ball gets lost in the surf, and this naked, bedraggled, salt-encrusted, beaten-up old man comes out of the bushes into this group of teenage girls. And it's like the ultimate challenge in correct speech and tact and negotiation. And it describes Odysseus being like, do I come up and grasp her ankles, which is a formal way of pleading, which you see in the Iliad with men doing to other men when they're like pleading for their life or something. Supplication. You see this even with Priam and Achilles in a very touching way. But he's like, should I do that, or should I keep my distance and be mindful? And he opts to keep his distance and speaks to her from afar in a way that clearly signals that he's not just some random hobo. He's not just some forlorn pirate. Oh, he is that, but he's more than just that. Washed up on the beach that's a nobody. And so he persuades this young woman to allow him to return back to the palace with her. And so he follows at a reasonable distance, and she tells him to beseech the names of the king and the queen of this island are also very interesting. The king is Alcinous or Alcinous, and the queen is Arete, which is like just virtue. Whereas
it said that
Alcinous,
she fulfilled it.
Yes,
there's a line in there that says like, and she represented it very well.
Yes, exactly. And Alcinous, the breakdown of Alcinous. Some people translate that as mighty mind. Greg Nosh translates it as one who facilitates mental connection. So it's a different meaning of nous and a slightly different connotation of alki, mighty or facilitating, expanding, growing, cultivating. And nous is this mind or mental connection that is Odysseus' superpower. And we just talked about in the last 4 books, Antinous, the kind of head of the suitors, being the opposite of that, one who is opposed to. So we've met his mirror in name on the island of the Phaeacians, the king and the daughter of the king and the queen, the daughter of the facilitator of mental connection and virtue itself, is this strange character Nausicaa, which means burner of ships. It's a very, very cryptic name. What does burning ships mean? And we can get into that in a little bit, because
You gotta
it's
burn the boats, man. You gotta burn the boats just so you can like, go on.
right. Yeah, and maybe for different reasons if you're like a conquistador than if you're an Aegean sailor. But
Right.
yeah. So anyways, we can talk about the symbolism there because there's so much going on in this Nausicaa passage. But
Well, I wanted to jump in before we get too far deep
sure.
into that. Just because I'm a douchebag, and I realized at this point that isn't it Odysseus?
He is
because this
very,
is basically
very
like where he
charismatic,
rizzes her up. And I actually underlined it. I was going to read it. That speech that he gives her on the beach.
It's excellent.
To kind of like talk. It's fantastic like speech. And you have this dude who's staying there with like an olive branch covering his junk, and that's basically how they describe him.
Yeah.
And he walks up to these young girls, and these young hot girls, we would imagine, and he's like, "Here I am at your mercy, princess. Are you a goddess or a mortal? If one of the gods who rules the sky up there, you're Artemis to the life, the daughter of mighty Zeus. I see her now. Just look at your build, your bearing, your lithe, flowing grace. But if you're one of the mortals living here on earth, 3 times blessed are your father, your queenly mother, 3 times over your brothers too. How often their hearts must warm with joy to see your striding into the dances, such a bloom of beauty. True, but he is the one more blessed than all the other men alive, the man who sways you with gifts and leads you home, his bride. I've never laid eyes on anyone like you, neither man nor woman. I look at you and had a sense of wonder takes me. Wait, once I saw the like in Delos, beside Apollo's altar, the young slip of a palm tree springing into the light. There I'd sailed, you'd see, with a great army in my wake, out on the long campaign that doomed my life to hardship. That vision, just as I stood there gazing, rapt for hours. No shaft like that had ever risen up from the earth. So now I marvel at you, my lady, rapt, enthralled, too struck with awe to grasp you by the knee, though pain has ground me down. Only yesterday, the 20th day, did I escape the wine-dark sea. Till then, the waves and the rushing gales had swept me on from the island of Ogygia, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest word. Now some power has tossed me here, doubtless to suffer still more torments on your shores. I can't believe that they'll stop. Long before that, the gods will give me more, still more. Compassion, princess. You, after all that I have suffered, you are the first I've come to. I know no one else, none in your city, no one in your land. Show me the way into town. Give me a rag for cover, just some cloth, some wrapper you carried with you here. And may the good gods give you all your heart desires, husband and house, and lasting harmony too. No finer, greater gift in the world than that. When a man and a woman possess their home, 2 minds, 2 hearts that work as one, despair to their enemies, a joy to all their friends, their own best claim to glory. And that is some riz. Like, you're amazing. Look, you're amazing. Look at you.
And the transition
the
so
man who knows you will be so lucky. You know? Yeah.
The transition from just heaping on praise on this woman and all these comparisons and speaking of his own military background, just alluding to it and the places he's gone and her beauty in comparison to all that, to now please help me.
Yes.
is so perfect. It's so excellent. And so she does help him. Not only does she help him, but she fantasizes about him marrying her. And her father, Alcinous, even offers this.
Yeah.
And it was in the offering of his daughter to Odysseus that the meaning of Nausicaa I began to get an idea of a theory of what Nausicaa might mean and what she symbolizes. Because what we see, so many of the things we're about to see described because we're going to be on the island of the Phaeacians for a while, hearing Odysseus talk about his journey, which we don't get to till book 9. But so many of these encounters are symbolic and mythic, and many of these characters, especially the ones with symbolically on the nose names, have symbolic meanings latent in them. And so what we see in Nausicaa, I believe, is an image of his own wife the last time he saw her 20 years ago. And there is a temptation here, not unlike the Sirens or the Lotus Eaters, or some of these other challenges, to dwell in the past and to fail to arrive at his real home by staying in a fantasy of what was, and his wife as he last saw her as a young island princess, not unlike Ithaca. And he does reject this very, very tastefully, very, very ultimately. I don't think we see the rejection until after we hear the stories and so forth in books 9 and 10. But it's, before we get to all that, there's the journey to the castle from the beach, where he follows at a good distance, and I believe Athena helps hide him, helps him be like invisible.
There are a few things about that. Yes, she does. She puts like a mist or whatever so that so that no one will see him and like, who the fuck are you? Why the fuck are you here? Like, basically they describe it as that she won't, so no one will challenge him while he's walking through the village, like, because he's a stranger. And she doesn't want him to have to deal with that kind of hassle. And, but the other thing that I thought was really interesting is that they mention it twice. Once, I think, right before he goes out to see the girl, or maybe after he's bathed himself and like goes back, to see the girl, whatever. It describes him. Athena comes down and makes him appear taller. It makes him taller and more jacked, like taller and more massive. Basically, is the way that it's translated in this translation, and just to make him seem more godly. And this is a through line to what they did to his. Didn't she do the same thing to his son?
And we'll see one more transformation like that with his father at the very end as well.
Yeah. So so basically, they do. She does the same thing. I mean, I guess it just the spell keeps going, but they mention it again as we get to the games of this. Like, they made him seem like jacked and like ready for action and whatever. When obviously in real life we have this dude who's been on a boat for whatever, like 20 days, eating rations and then almost drowning. And I mean, I guess he was probably living pretty well on the island. I don't know how much working out he was doing, but like it was
there's one little home gym set up.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that was one of the Calypso's like things. He's like, I got this awesome home gym. Like several Nautilus machines here. But yeah. So she's making him kind of bigger in life than he actually is. Which is just an interesting sidebar. I just noticed that a couple times when I do it. I'm like, that's kind of interesting that the goddess, here's a man, but she's making him like, she's like hologramming him out to like be better. Everyone's seeing him as being bigger than he is.
Yeah. And I think there's the conversation with the king and the queen, which leads to the games that are had, and ultimately to what might have been one of the first Order of Fire in-group jokes about girthy hams that was going around a years and a half back.
Oh yeah. Is that from this part? I missed that part actually in this, but
it's one of the Phaeacians is like, who's this stranger with like oh no, I'm sorry, that's why we missed it, because it's not the it's not this section of the games. It's when we get back to Ithaca. I'm mixing up my stranger seeing Odysseus for the first time scenes. That's
so girthy hams and bandy-legged is later.
Yes, that's later. I'm sorry, I'm getting my scenes mixed up. But yes, but we do get some commentary from the Phaeacians about this strange character, and he gets challenged by some of the impudent young men in some games, and he basically takes them on directly and throws this. They're challenging him to foot races and boxing and stuff, and he says, "Look here, you little whippersnappers," and he picks up this giant discus that's like heavier than what they throw, and he hucks it like farther than any of them can throw it. He's like, "All right, you guys match that, and I'll take on any of you except my gracious host, and we'll I can match any of you." And the king has this very funny line where he says, "Well, okay, so we can't match the strangers in athleticism, but we still beat you in sailing and dancing and music." And then they bring out their bard to sing songs. And as you were saying before, Homer seems to take greater effort in describing the how things are done and the excellence with which things are done, which is a through line that we see in the Iliad as well. But as Harmar Brereton says, Homer loves excellence. And whenever someone can do something well, whenever a sailor is particularly good at his craft, whenever a blacksmith is particularly good at his craft, Homer takes the time to describe the perfection with which he does his routine. He undoes the sails and lashes the line and does all the sailing stuff properly, and he does it correctly, and he does it quickly. The blacksmith forges his product with skill in this way, and he takes the time to describe it poetically, and we seem to see a little bit of that in how Homer describes the Phaeacians in their
and also in the way that he describes how Odysseus makes the raft. There's a lot of descriptive detail, and he does this, and he lines it up just perfectly, and he did it like all the he's the excellence in which he does that, and that's to do a through line. I think to captivate a male audience, it's showing mastery. As a virtue, he's bringing back mastery and excellence and all these things, not just battle or whatever, but look at how good he is. He does this so well, and all.
Yes, and in the Iliad we saw this a lot more with how men fight, and but mostly about fighting. In the Odyssey, we see it with craft, and there's a little bit of description of blacksmithing. Arguably, the greatest passage of this descriptive excellence is in Book 18 of the Iliad, where we see the description of Hephaestus's shield that he crafts for Achilles. It's like 2.5 pages just describing all the craftsmanship of the shield. But we see that with craft in the Odyssey and sailing, and we also see it in speech. Like as you were saying before, and how Odysseus addresses Nausicaa. We also see that in how
subtle
he addresses
winning words is the way that it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we saw it a little hints of it in Telemachus's address of Nestor in the earlier parts, and how he addressed the suitors with Athena's or mentor's aid as well. But that was just a foreshadowing. That was like a primer, and now we're seeing the master at work in Odysseus, and how he, in the hardest negotiating context imaginable, manages to win. So many things could go wrong if you are a naked old man speaking to a teenage girl in a land you don't know, people you don't know. So many things could go wrong there, and he managed to negotiate it just right, and that is craft too. And what Homer is doing in the context of singing these epics that immortalize heroes from the past, he is immortalizing their skill and also skill and excellence as the mediums by which someone might become immortalized. So this is, praise of the gods and praise of heroes, but also praise of excellence and this particular kind of craft and mental connection that Odysseus has as something worth emulating as well.
Cool.
So
I need to try and make a mental note of that, because that was, I should pull that for a reel. That was a good little bit. But yeah, there's as they have this competition with the men there, I mean, it's a great little back and forth that they have. In this guy basically taunting Odysseus, like, well, first of all, I also did find where they mentioned his thighs. Like what you were looking up, like
so it might be a translation difference. Maybe it was here. Yeah.
Maybe. Well, I mean, it didn't talk about the other people, but it just said, like, he's no mean man. Like, come, my friends, let's ask our guest if he knows the ropes of any sport. He's no mean man, not with a build like that. Look at his thighs, his legs. What a massive pair! What a pair of arms! His massive neck, his big rippling strength. Nor is he past his prime, just beaten down by one too many blows.
Okay, so it is in this section. I was right the first time. It's just a different translation. That must have been like the girthy hams must have been from like Lattimore or one of the other translators, not Fagles. I should know that offhand, but I don't.
Yeah, good. Yeah, girthy hams. I mean, that sounds like it would be something that you'd like maybe an older English translation, or then
as opposed to massive legs or something.
Yeah.
Like
that. Yeah. And then he calls him one of the things, and I'm thinking I'm going to pull this for a quote for like one of those little graphics, I'll put up on the Instagram or whatever. But when the guys who's taunting him says, he's taunting him to see if he has any skills in any sports, and he's saying it's fit and proper for you to know your sports. What greater glory attends a man while he's alive than what he wins with his racing feet and striving hands? Come and compete then. Throw your cares to the wind. Like, you could put that in like an athletic auditorium.
Come and compete. Throw your cares to the wind.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a really great little line with that context. And then because he was talking trash, basically because Odysseus at first said, I'm not here to do that. Basically, I literally was just shipwrecked a day ago. And then
some relevant backstory on that too, that might put his hesitancy in context is part of the reason that a lot of the Greeks aren't necessarily fond of Odysseus. And we see this a little bit in Plato's Apology, where Socrates seems to hold Odysseus in some degree of like worthy of cross-examination or criticism, is that Odysseus is held to be responsible for the death of Ajax. Now, the manner of his responsibility for the death of Ajax is kind of funny. There was a competition, and Odysseus beat Ajax in one of these competitions. And Ajax was so salty about it that he killed himself, if I remember correctly. I'll have to double check, but it was like he's held as being responsible for the death of Ajax, and it was basically just Ajax losing a competition and being really sad about it.
It sounds like it's on him.
Well, yeah, right. But we see this in Book 10. So next week we'll see this, where Odysseus descends into the underworld and sees, among other people, Ajax, and Ajax refuses to talk to him because even in death he's still bitter about losing in a competition. So with that in mind, it might change how we think about Odysseus being a little bit hesitant, a little bit of reluctant to get into contests with people upon whom he is going to depend in order to get home. Because it risks putting him in a lose-lose situation where if he loses, they might look down upon him. But if he wins, they might get upset with him. So the best way to win the game of Nostos, the best way to win the game of homecoming, is to talk his way out of an actual contest with these
Yeah.
people, which he
But
manages
then they
to do.
insult him.
Right. And he still
yeah.
avoids a contest, but he does it basically by intimidation.
Yeah, well, he talks a lot of shit too. Another one that I'm going to steal for a quote. This one had more of these than I found in the last one, but basically they insinuate that he's a shitty pirate and he's not really a big deal at all, and he doesn't know the sports of civilized men, basically.
Right.
Odysseus like snaps back and gets pissed off and snaps back at this, and he's like, you're a reckless fool, I can see that. So the gods don't hand out all their gifts at once, not build and brains and flowing speech to all. One man may fail to impress us with his looks, but a god can crown his words with beauty, charm, and men will look on him with delight when he speaks out. Never faltering, filled with winning self-control, he shines forth at assembly grounds, and people gaze at him like a god when he walks through the street. And he goes on about this a little bit, about the differing skills of men, which I think is actually very important. It's something that we have to remind men about all the time. Like especially in, the Order of Fire and the First Men, and all the questions that I get. I got a question that was sincere. I think it was on my other YouTube. I got a question that was sincerely posed, so I actually responded to it, but I was just like, I can't believe you're asking me this. And it was basically like asking me, like, it was talking about Odin and Tyr or something. It was like, is it impossible to have all the virtues of men at once? And
basically,
well, yes, but he made it sound like they were mutually exclusive, and I was like, no, like men have differing gifts, but they aren't mutually exclusive. You can still have some of this and just more of that. You don't have to have like all of this and none of that. Like that's
right. You can try to be balanced.
Yeah, it was a weird. Yeah, I mean, because that's what we try to encourage people. But yeah, I mean, people have different talents. They're going to bring different things to the table, and that's kind of what he's underlining here in a really again well-spoken way.
Yeah, well, and that's what we see in some of the tragic heroes of the Iliad too. Odysseus is a great fighter. He's not the greatest fighter. Achilles is obviously better. Hector is better. One could make the case that Diomedes is certainly better. One could make the case that Agamemnon and Menelaus were better. But he was skillful at fighting, and he was skillful at speech in a way that Ajax, for example, was not. So one of the things that makes Achilles an interesting character is he is the greatest fighter, and he's one of the most skillful speakers. Contrary to what's his name? That professor we were talking about in the Republic series was saying, Michael Segru. Michael Segru's depiction of the Iliad has Achilles as like an emotionally retarded individual. It's like, no. He was well spoken in his way in that culture, and Odysseus is a great warrior, and he's a great speaker, but he's also very thoughtful. He's also he takes his time, he observes, he constructs plans, and he's skillful in a variety of different ways. He has techne, which is this idea of craft, and the sort of Greek root of technology, but techne is like skill. And it's one of the traits that is contrasted with just raw might or social status, that was, as we might see in Achilles or Agamemnon, in the contest of who is the best of the Achaeans, which was this very important question in this competitive pirate society. And we see a little bit of that competition to see who is best here in book 8 on the island of the Phaeacians with these challenges, and Odysseus, very in his insulting but also in his giving and out speech, says, "Hey, we've all got our own skills. I guess yours isn't speech. You maybe implicitly you must be good at other things."
Yeah.
Yeah. There's room enough for both of us here. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation for the people who are interested in exploring that. Greg Nodge's The Best of the Achaeans is all about that question. And it's brought up a little bit in the Ancient Greek Hero as well, which I can't recommend highly enough. But
so the other thing that struck me about this, like as they back down and be like, like they're two things. One, it just makes me want, like, this is something that is probably unknowable because it's something that cannot be transcribed or recorded very well before video. But like, how are they getting down? That was so impressive. Like, is this like, are we watching a dance number? Like are they coming out like choreographed and like doing all kinds of like Lord of the Dance shit? Like what's going on here? Because I mean, like, it's just, this is not like, I mean, I assume drunken party dancing is probably like almost a human universal, and that probably looks about the same. I feel like if you would have had Dionysian revels, probably wouldn't have looked that different from people at a rave. But like maybe not a rave, maybe more like dancing to rock and roll or something, like because rave is very specific. Yeah, there was no glow sticks probably in the ancient world. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting to try to imagine what kind of dance scene went down that was so like, because Odysseus, like, this is kind of why they liked him then. He was like, you clearly are the best dancers. And gave him that. And like, this man has good taste.
Give him that, yeah.
Yeah. He gave him that. And so like, that's kind of like he it made them like him in that way. And the other thing that I noticed, and you may have some thoughts, or this may have been part of the bigger discussion that you do in your reading about this, is it was a really odd, I thought, choice to have them sing about like they describe the song, and they actually like basically tell the whole story of the affair between Hephaestus and Aphrodite. And obviously with the god of war being the stud bull that she's playing with. And it basically gives the whole description of the thing down to how he catches them and in chains, which is interesting, and like how they basically eventually get out. But it's kind of interesting. I mean, has that been talked about in the text? Like why throw in a tale of adultery right here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's Homer is so deep. Any given section you can take and basically write a master's thesis on. But sure. This is actually not one I've explored in a ton of depth. Now, when I was going back through it yesterday, it did stick out at me in a way that hadn't before. The concluding lines of, was it Apollo and one of the other gods, who are like, even with the chains, I probably still would have gone for it. It's just a funny little conclusion to that story in the way that the bard says it. It's like, even knowing the outcome, I'd take the outcome, and even worse, for a chance to get with her. It's almost a comedic touch to the retelling of this ridiculous story, and it's described as ridiculous in the story. Hephaestus says, "Look how ridiculous this is." And all the gods basically gather around to laugh at Ares and Aphrodite.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting choice. There almost certainly is some. I can't imagine there not being some symbolic significance to that. To Odysseus. I mean, it's an ancient story, Ares and Aphrodite, but that story specifically, when there are so many stories of the gods one could have sung about, there has to be some symbolic significance to that. I'll have to think about that.
I mean, obviously there was an opportunity for adultery there. He just
Yes.
married her, and so it could be. I mean, I'm not going to say that that was it, but like it could be a little warning mixed in about like maybe don't do that, because he
Yeah.
could have made what was being offered to him was adultery technically. Like it's a
Yeah.
second marriage. Like without so while his wife's at home. So there's that. Like
Right.
I don't know if that's it, but interesting thing that they were singing that as the Lord of the Dance thing was happening. I think at the same time. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, and then the bard starts to sing about the Trojan War and the Trojan
Oh yeah,
horse. This is where we hear about the Trojan horse. And it's here that Alcinous notices their guest is weeping, hearing the story of the Trojan War. And is like, huh, well, this is interesting. We should stop the music because we shouldn't, you know, um, injure our guest in this way. And this is sort of the beginning of the unveiling of who Odysseus is actually and where he's been, because they've been entertaining this guest without really knowing who he is this whole time. And so now when they see him crying, hearing the story of Troy and the people who didn't make it home and all this, that's when they're like, who are you exactly? Did you know someone who was lost on the return to Troy? And Odysseus says, well, funny you should mention that, basically. And we're about to begin to hear the story of who he is. And that's sort of where book 8 ends, and we really get into it in book 9.
interesting. So that's it's kind of that's our bookend of this saga. This part of this set of the episodes. I was going to open with like in previous episodes of because we had that cliffhanger at the end because there's all those people going to kill
Telemachus, yes.
Telemachus,
and we have the cliffhanger, and then we jump, and then we jump to
which pisses already off, but that's how they actually do those shows.
Yeah.
So like, oh, and here's a whole season about something totally different.
Right.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where we're at right now. But yeah, so that's I think we kind of went to the end of it already, which is very cool. That's fairly tight. I can actually see comments right now,
Okay.
which I haven't been able to before. But anyway, McTubis, anyway, thank you for the happy birthday wishes. I saw that on there when we started, but I didn't want to interrupt Chris while he was talking because he was saying something good when I saw it. So I wanted to keep going. But and then somebody's asking if those are the folio editions of the
Yes,
Odyssey.
that's why I grabbed them, and they are indeed. They're very, very nicely illustrated. London Folio Society. So do recommend these if you have the money for it and like creating like nice libraries. Folio Society is great. Now, I didn't buy these. These were actually a gift to me from a particular bibliophile of an uncle who also introduced me to Greg Naj. So I am very, very grateful to him for these beautiful books that he sends to me. Yes, Folio Society is very, very, very high quality for people who like not just good books, but like good books.
Right.
Hardcover, cloth bound, leather bound, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So why don't you take a moment here and pitch your homework group?
Oh, it's a dangerous thing because the first go round, and we're coming up on a year, was originally 6 people, dropped down to 5, and then we had a latecomer jump in who has done an absolutely heroic job of catching up. That's brought us back up to 6 people. I threw out a link on a whim because a couple other people expressed interest for a second go round. So it's about 18 to 20 months, the full curriculum. And so we'll be starting this one in January, and we've already got 15 people over 6. So I think we can handle that. But if there's anyone else listening to this who might be interested, I will I'll put another link up in a few places that are reachable. Maybe I could put a comment in here that I will delete come December, so we don't have people asking in like April, like, hey, is it too late to jump in and read all these books to catch up again? But it'll be fun. We'll be going through the Iliad, the Odyssey, Adam Nicholson, Greg Nage, Harmar Brereton, the Iliad and the Odyssey again in different translations, and then self-selected separate books that include people like Greg Nage, Doug Frame, Leonard Molnar, and other related books. I think we had Hamlet on there because there's the Hamlet Odyssey crossovers are massive. And there's some Nietzsche works like Homer's Contest, which is an excellent essay, and it's one of Nietzsche's shorter works, which makes it nice and readable. Relevant not just to Iliad Book 23, which is Patroclus' funeral and the games there, but also this section we just read in Book 7 and 8 of the Odyssey, with these competitions and the role of competitions in Greek society. So Nietzsche's essay, Homer's Contest, it's a great, I think it's like 8 pages, describing the importance of competition in sort of sublimating this martial instinct that is both expressive of life, but also totally destructive, and internally destructive if you end up with one individual that just dominates everything and you lose the meaning of the competition internally. So there's a lot of tension within the competitive culture that Nietzsche is exploring in Homer's context. And in Nietzsche's view, it all goes back to Homer in these books. So very fun read, very short, but relevant. And then anyways, we'll be reading 2 personally selected extras. I've already picked out mine. It's Nikos Kazantzakis's Odysseus, or The Odyssey, a modern sequel. It's a very strange book.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned it last time. Yeah.
Right. And then we'll be translating sections of Homer to sort of conclude things. And it should take total about, like I said, 18 to 20 months. So for people who are interested, you can like message me on Instagram. Don't message me after December. That'll be the cutoff. But up until then, and people can do this stuff on their own too. They don't necessarily need to go with the group, although it can be fun. You get that extra push. You get that extra, I need to have this done before the meeting on Saturday or whatever. It can help to go through these books with other people, and you can talk about it, ask questions, and all that fun stuff.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, I just figured we'd throw it out for people because, sometimes people's eyes are bigger than their stomach when they come to like, I'm going to read all the Homer things. And so you might get some dropouts too. It could happen. But I figured I'd let people know that because, we have, I know we had a few members of the First Men in the last one. And I don't know if you have any for the new one or not, but
yes.
I kind of figured. I mean, there's a Venn diagram that overlaps with this project and I guess that's about the best way to phrase it with the First Men. So it's kind of a cool associated project. So I wanted to bring it to light. But anyway, I think these are really tight. These the Odyssey shows so far. This is the second one, and there's a lot of information, but we're not like just meandering, yapping on for like 2 hours about some other complete other thing, which is normally what we do. Let's see.
The hosts don't absolutely despise modern pop. To answer the first part of Cal of Knight's question, it would be fun to watch a breakdown in differences between the book and the epic, the musical concept album online. I have not heard of that. It sounds interesting.
I don't know that. I mean, obviously, it would be depends. By who?
It's kind of a big can of worms to open as a project of comparing Homer's Odyssey to any given random piece of media that borrows from the Odyssey, because there's just so much of it. Like, right. And you don't, I think people people don't understand how fundamentally Homeric the world we live in actually is. And this is one of the reasons I try to push people to read Homer more, is because you live in a Homeric world. This is sort of the opening of The Hero and the Man. Is like, just to give like a sense of this, there was a tweet that went viral last year. Someone in the Intel space was saying that all of these Chinese state actors have started reading Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, because the Chinese realized that Homer is the source code of the West, more so than the Bible. And so if you understand Homer, you understand the Western mentality and the Western mindset. The Bible is very incomplete in that regard. It builds upon Homeric concepts, especially the Iliad and the notion of the hero. But it's like the Iliad is actually in some ways broader, and the Odyssey broadens it to an almost total encapsulation of the Western mindset. And like, if you understand Homer, you understand your own culture and you understand yourself, and you start to see, oh, Watership Down is the Odyssey. Oh, like you start to see the Odyssey in these other places. Ulysses by James Joyce, you begin to understand what he's doing, which I think evil is maybe overstepping it, but gross is not under an overstatement. Ulysses is gross, in my opinion. Other people might have different tastes. I think a lot of it is just sophisticants trying to be sophisticated. But it's just a gross book. Very, very clever.
Sophisticated trying to be sophisticated. Would they be mid-sophisticants?
Yeah. It's a profoundly not mid book, but it's like the greatest genius of probably 20th century writing. Just wallowing in mouth sounds and gross body descriptions and things. It's a very weird sensation reading Ulysses, but and everything is an inversion of the Odyssey, right? So the Odyssey is 20 years at sea or away from home. Ulysses is a single day in the life. In the Odyssey, Penelope is faithful the entire time Odysseus is gone. In Joyce's Ulysses, our protagonist is gone for a single day, and his wife is already preparing to have an affair. You don't see the affair. The affair isn't consummated, but it's implied that it is going to happen after the conclusion of the story. The Odyssey is Odysseus trying to come home and being thwarted at every turn, and it's a struggle. In Joyce's Ulysses, it's one man doing everything in his power to not go home, wandering in every back alley, going to every place, trying to just avoid home. It's just an inversion. But he chose Ulysses as an inversion because he said Odysseus was the most developed character in all of Western literature. And he is, Joyce was as the supreme genius who is conscious of his own genius. Homer was the rabbit to chase and the man to outperform.
Right. And being
I think
kind of a degenerate is what it sounds like.
A little bit.
Like, can we do this but shitty? Like
a little bit, and tearing down.
Yeah.
Joyce is an interesting character. If for those of you who don't know, the Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man concludes with a very strange passage that is a kind of invocation. And here's this Irishman speaking in English, invoking a Greek spirit, and that spirit is the spirit of Daedalus. He invokes Daedalus to guide him in the crafting of a new soul for his people. And Daedalus is, of course, the creator of the labyrinth that housed the Minotaur in Minos, Crete, or wherever it was. So it's the craftsman,
King Minos.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting seeing people from disparate parts of the world, whether it's Hayao Miyazaki or Yukio Mishima in Japan, or James Joyce in Ireland, feeling like they have to go back to Homer to find inspiration to breathe new life into the soul of their people. And you see this also in Germany. Now, this is the basic idea of Friedrich Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy. There's two sides of that book. There's the academic side, which is the Apollonian and the Dionysian, and explaining how tragedy works in resolving the sort of despair of life. But then there's a section of the essay that's alluded to at the beginning that is the political side, where he says Germany is in a place to pick this up and to carry forward the life of Homer in not Greece, in Germany. We are in a position to maybe pick up Homer's mantle in our vitality. And this is, of course, exactly what Mishima and Miyazaki were doing in Japan and what Joyce was trying to do in Ireland. And it's just interesting to see this pattern of people using Homer as a source of Zoe, of this spiritual life for non-Greek peoples. And I think that's real. I think it's certainly played out well, I think, in the works of Miyazaki and Mishima. And it's kind of worked with Joyce. I don't think it worked very well because Ireland is still very much Catholic. And my understanding is that most people in Ireland don't like Joyce. Joyce is kind of an East Coast American and European literati object of interest. The Irish seem to dislike him generally, but anyways, it's just interesting to note the cultural power and pervasive influence of Homer in these works. We just talked about Nausicaa. People might have heard of a film by Hayao Miyazaki called Nausicaa of the Valley of the Winds, explicitly in the title, borrowing from the Odyssey. And Nausicaa in the Odyssey is described as a savior. Odysseus even promises that he will worship her like a deathless goddess as he is departing, and he will always be grateful to her and thank her. And Nausicaa in the Miyazaki film, which superficially doesn't look anything like the Odyssey at all, nevertheless, Nausicaa is a kind of savior figure, is in some ways kind of a Christ figure, but yeah, conversation for another time. But just understanding that influence is it is worth your time to invest in understanding these things if you want to understand, the cultural water that we are swimming in.
Interesting.
So that would be a case to look into epic musical concepts, but there's just so many of them.
No, he's talking about a specific one. That's what I was. That's whatever my boomer face when it was up against the screen looking at it that was me Googling it. And it's a specific project by a specific guy.
Okay.
The art's pretty bad. But just as an artist, the art's pretty bad. But it looks a little juvenile. But that doesn't mean the music is.
Right.
Music. Sometimes sometimes music people do great music things, but they pick terrible covers for them. But it seems like something. I'll have a look at it. If it's a music thing, so I can't actually play it right now and be like instantly like I hate this, or like oh, this is actually quite good, because it could go either way. So I'll have a look at it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much we would be able to. There's only so much you can extrapolate from that, especially if I can't tell if it's instrumental or if it's sung, but if it's which it might be more. It might be better if it was instrumental. Like, how does this book of the Odyssey feel? Yeah, it might be interesting, but
be tricky to do. Yeah,
You know what I was thinking? I wanted to put this out to our music guys, but I don't know if we have any guys who are would do that project. But I was thinking while I was reading this that I wanted a playlist for reading this because I have to have some kind of white noise uh, ambient stuff going when I read usually. Just to drown out other things and just to kind of
Sure.
like separate the zone and kind of get me out of checking X and other things. So a lot of times I'll do that when I read, do research and focus on stuff. I usually use things that are like binaural beats, that kind of stuff. And so I'll, I'm like, I want like some ambient music because the thing is I can't read nor can I write if they to something with a melody,
Right.
because that actually like funny, it was our last ritual, like there was drumming going on while I was talking and I was like I can't you have to stop like because like my brain can't do that, like it'll pick up the melody and like I can't, it'll overcome it, but and so like I have to work on that kind of stuff. But it'd be interesting to have a playlist or have someone make ambient music to read Homer
Yeah.
too, like with
I was
just something like smooth with like a little bit of Greek instrumentation like in the background or like something like that, but also like a vibe. Like there's a particular vibe, but yeah,
I get overcome with inspiration to do things that are way outside of my scope or skill set or experience sometimes.
same.
About 3
All the
months
time.
ago, I downloaded some music writing software and was trying to like write some stuff. I had the idea of putting together an instrumental track that was 2 lines of 6/4 followed by 1 line of 2/2 as its notation, and that 3-part, that 3 bar pattern. Repeat, this would probably just be instrumental, but could create a kind of dactylic hexameter ambiance
Uh-huh.
that captures the rhythm of Homeric epic, but without needing to conform that, which is very clunky in English. Very few people can actually do dactylic hexameter in English well. English lends itself to iambic pentameter much more fluidly. There are some good examples. Charge of the Light Brigade does it well. If you read it, half a league, half a league, half a league onward into the valley of death. That's dactylic hexameter, and it works. Most of the time it doesn't. But if it was just instrumental music, you could have 6/4, 6/4, 2/2, 6/4, 6/4, 2/2, in a way that sounds interesting. For someone with actual musical experience, not me.
Yeah, that involves music theory and stuff like that at that point. That's like way out of I love actually programming music. It's super fun. Another thing that I can totally get into a flow state with and spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours doing. I don't have any music theory or understand that, but you don't really need it to do it. Like like with all the visual elements that you use to program music now, I had Logic 3, and I was making my own theme songs for a while, like my podcast themes and whatever. And it's not that hard to do something cool for like a sound background soundtrack stuff, but to actually make a song, that's a different level of the game.
Yeah,
but to do background stuff, it's not always. Although I find the ambient stuff is a little harder to program than it feels like it should be. Like it seems like it should be like just throw in some of this and that and whatever, like whatever. Because it doesn't even have to have like a beat, like it doesn't have to have a structure. But it's a little harder to do because I've played with it before. But it would be a fun little project to do, just to make something with that vibe. And or maybe I'll find something that has that vibe already because there's so many musicians doing interesting things. But it could be an interesting project. But
Caleb Knight says,
anyway.
I forget if the modern musical phenomenon of lo-fi has a melody. It is something Jack has likely looked at without knowing. Lo-fi. I mean, I feel like lo-fi can refer to a few different things. Whenever I hear lo-fi, I think of the like Alan Watts voiceover set to some like chill step
backbeat that you just set on, as like ambiance. Basically, they've done it with Jordan Peterson. They've done it with a lot of people. But Alan Watts is the one that I always think of when people talk about lo-fi. But I'm sure lo-fi refers to things beyond
like Akira, like Akira the Dawn stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he calls his meaning wave, is what he does. But
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that stuff it's he churns out so much stuff. It's amazing.
He's a workhorse.
Yeah, for sure. Very good stuff. And also, I guess he played in bands for years, so he knew what. So
he's got that theoretical background.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, for sure. But anyway, I think like I like these shows being tight.
Yeah,
like
I feel like we've already wandered a little ways away from the Odyssey.
yeah, I know. It's becoming old show style. Like, why are they talking about traffic signs? What? Like. But
oh no, not Thomas Harris again.
Why are they talking about Hannibal Lecter again?
The pigs are coming. The pigs are coming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And see, I'm right there.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Every time I hear the word hors d'oeuvre, but hors d'oeuvre tata. Anyway, I think we'll wrap it up there. And if you guys are watching along, obviously like and subscribe. And as I'm going to have a special edition podcast come out tomorrow, or tomorrow or the next day. I have a podcast I have to do in person soon, but as I did an interview with our member D, Dr. Delanca, about his experiences doing the drug iboga in Africa with the Bwiti tribe. And he spent a month in Africa doing iboga with the Bwiti tribe. Well, he didn't spend a month doing iboga because I think that would wear on you. I think you'd probably be insane. But he had some gross stories and some cool stories about the meaning of what it is, whatever. And I recorded a podcast with him in person a few weeks ago. So that's queued up and set as a draft. I just have to make a cover and drop it.
Nice.
So we have that coming out in the next day or so. And as always, and he that's why I brought it up, because he says, tell a friend to tell a friend, like about the podcast. That's how he ended it.
Nice.
But yeah, so tell a friend to tell a friend. And also, we're going to start accepting applications. We are technically now. So you can, if you've been waiting to apply, you can apply. But I'm going to make more of a push of it next week. We're going to accept applications of the Order of Fire's First Men again. And I've been working on, with the help of your wife, I've been working on our marketing page for that, and so people understand what they're signing up for a little bit better. And so we have that. I think I squared that away now, and that's why I've been dropping all of those. If you guys are curious, I spent last week making event videos to kind of to give people better sense of what our events are like. And because we have all this great footage, I've just thrown out a couple reels, but I wanted to give good summaries, like a good sense of what our events are like. And I realized, like, a couple of them, like, I still have never done one for the one you were at. Like, I've done reels, but I've never done a video for it. I've just used the footage a lot, but like, because it's one of our most scenic ones. I think when it was the Vegas one,
it was awesome.
They're all pretty scenic, but that one was, the location was very good. But anyway, so again, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, stay solar.
Stay solar.